probably the stupidest idea I've ever had. What the f is a pendulum card? Hi guys, welcome to Bros.Gaming. My name is Brandon. Today we are continuing my journey of returning to Yu-Gi-Oh after 15 years and building a deck and seeing how it goes competitively. Now, as you all know, if you've been following the series, I've been building a Dark Magician deck, and just last week I finally reached my goal of winning 2 games out of 4. Now, whilst this might not be a great score for people who are playing competitively, for me this is a massive milestone. So in this vlog I'm attempting to try and beat that record of at least winning 3 out of 4 games. Now, this will be a very hard record to beat considering there are a lot of powerful decks out there in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can my Dark Magician deck win against the best? Serious question I'm actually asking, I have no idea. Thank you very much. Yeah. Upon arriving to Grand J Games, I collected some cards I'd ordered, including a second copy of Red Eye's Dark Dragoon, as well as some other cards that I might decide to add to the deck, like Nibiru or Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. So for week 1 and week 2 of today's vlog, this is the Dark Magician deck I will be using. Now, this deck list is pretty straightforward. It's very similar to the one I used in the previous vlog, with the exception of a second Dark Dragoon. Game 1 of week 1 was against a pure Cyber Dragon deck. Now, as a legacy player, or a Yugi Boomer, I'm very excited to play against Cyber Dragons. They're such a fun deck and very nostalgic for when I used to play during the Duel Monsters and GX era. Round 1, I was allowed to go first. Now, I was able to set up a fun Dark Burning Magic board. What it involves is me setting up Dark Magician Girl, and having a Dark Burning Magic set to blow up my opponent's field. I also had a Dark Magical Circle ready to banish any of my opponent's cards, as well as a Dark Renewal set to pop. Now, if you are familiar with Dark Magician decks, Dark Renewal isn't one of those cards that usually makes the list, but I find it very fun to use. It's a great tool in order to pop my opponent's monsters. Turn 2, my opponent started linking away for a Nightmare Phoenix. Before Phoenix was able to pop anything, I activated Dark Renewal to tribute his Phoenix, as well as Magician's Rod to bring out a second copy of Dark Magician. My opponent then attempted to make a recovery board, but I used Dark Burning Magic to blow up his field, and then had a set Eternal Soul to bring out my third Dark Magician, and went for game. Game 2, my opponent was able to set up a board of 2 Cyber Dragons, 1 Cyber Dragon Nashta, 1 Back Row, and 1 Boral Sword Dragon. Now, the reason my opponent didn't summon any Xyz Cyber Dragons, it was simply because he didn't have access to any. Since I didn't have much to work with in turn 2, all I could do is preemptively play Secret Village, set Eternal Soul, and 1 monster. The next turn, I was lucky in that he didn't summon many more monsters. Decided to go for battle phase, take out my monster, and then go directly with Boral Sword and Cyber Dragon. Turn 3, I was on the ropes, but I was lucky enough to draw into Magician's Souls, which allowed me to make my next play. I was able to summon Dark Magician to the field using Magician's Soul's effect, and then I linked away for Imduk. Now, with my set Eternal Soul, I then brought back Dark Magician and went into battle phase. With Imduk's effect, I took out one of his Cyber Dragons, and then with Dark Magician, I took out Cyber Dragon number 2. I then used Secrets of Dark Magic to bring out the one and only Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. I destroyed his Cyber Dragon Nashta with Dragoon and then went to Maid Phase 2. In Maid Phase 2, after bringing out Dragoon onto the field and popping his Boral Sword, my opponent scooped, which meant that I took Game 1. Now, Week 1 very much felt like I was chilling with the crew in the schoolyard because Game 2 was against Elemental Heroes. Right, it's an anime protagonist battle. Dark Magicians versus Elemental Heroes, Yugi versus Jaden. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Now, our Elemental Hero player, Karim, he won the dice roll, and in round 1, I'm pretty sure he bricked, because all he was able to do was set 2 and play Elemental Hero Liquid Soldier, so then turn passed to me. In turn 2, I set a mysterious back row, which I can't quite remember what it was, but I then played Magician's Salvation, which let me set Eternal Soul from deck. Now, I had a Tamice United Dragon and a Dark Magician in hand, so I wanted to fuse away into Dragoon. I special summoned Tamice by sending Salvation to Grave. In response, he had a set Mask Change ready to go, so he fused away for Masked Hero Acid. Now, I've never encountered Acid before. Now, Acid took out my back row, and I was in a little bit of trouble. But I decided to risk it anyway, and so I used Tamice's effect to fusion away with Dark Magician in my hand into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, my opponent did admittedly misplay in that his set back row was Rivalry of the Warlords. If he had activated it before I was able to fuse away for Dragoon, and stuck with Tamice. But fortunately, I was able to still go through with my plan by using Dark Dragoon, getting rid of his acid, and then going directly for his life points. So turn 4 passed to me, and I went for game. Round 2, Karim had a way better hand than he did in the first one, and I had a way worse hand. And so he was able to do what Elemental Heroes do best, and swarm the field with a whole bunch of heroes. His end board had a Malicious, Dark Phoenix Enforcer, and a Masked Dark Law. Now, my deck doesn't do too well with being banished. I have no recovery for it, so I knew I had to get rid of his Dark Law pretty quickly. However, he also had his Dark Phoenix, so I had to try and figure out a way to get around both of them very quickly. In my turn, I was lucky enough to draw into a Super Poly. Then I went into a play I hadn't really considered. I was kind of like making it up as I go along. So I used Super Poly to fuse Magician's Rod with his Dark Law into Starving Venom Dragon. He used Starving Venom Dragon's ability to copy Phoenix Enforcers. He used his Phoenix Enforcer to destroy my Starving Venom, and then in turn, Venom blew up his side of the field. So both of us at empty fields, I then used Magician's Soul to bring out Dark Magician. I then used Hidden Bond between Master and Student to bring out Dark Magician Girl to set up my Dark Burning Magic play again. Now, I had a bit of a crossroads moment in deciding to stick with my Dark Burning Magic plan or go for something entirely different.
Well, open up the stick with your life barrel.
I linked away my Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl into Gloomy and used Gloomy's ability to snatch his Phoenix Enforcer from Grave into my side of the field. Now, as much as I tried to be big brain with my plays, he was able to get rid of my Gloomy, my Phoenix Enforcer, and my entire back row, and leaving his side of the field with a Destiny Hero Plasma and a Dark Law once again. So facing his board, like Monster Effect negates, as well as any card that I try to send to graveyard would be banished instead. I had no choice but to scoop round 2. Whilst I don't have the play-by-play of round 3, that was a super intense duel. Much as I tried to play around his Plasmas and his Dark Laws, he took round 3. In no way am I disappointed with this loss. It's like one of the best duels I've had since coming back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's so cool to see what an Elemental Hero deck looks like in the modern times. Game 3 was against Douglas and his son Avalon deck. This deck scares the living shit out of me. It is a fantastic, well put together deck. And I couldn't even attempt to tell you the play-by-plays of everything that he does, but it is fantastic to watch. I only really have one go-to strategy in handling them, and that is my Secret Village Spellcaster lockout strategy. So turn 1, I set up my typical Dark Burning Magic board of Dark Magician Girl, and a Magician's Rod, in the metaverse to bring out a Secret Village on my opponent's turn. Sure enough, I was able to bring out Secret Village on his turn to prevent him from using any further spells. Then attempted to follow up with Sunfire Blossom, I think it's called, by sending it to grave to search from deck. Now, I was fortunate enough to have an Ash in hand, so I was able to Ash his card, and then he decided to scoop to move into Game 2. Now, Game 2 was very much what you expect to see first thing the Sun Avalon deck like is. Bringing out a whole lot of monsters and me just nodding my head and going, oh. Now Game 3 allowed us to go first again. Despite me setting up this board, Douglas is a very smart player, so with some strategic siding in, he was able to use Evenly Matched to banish my entire board except for one card, and then the last card was then banished by Cosmic Cyclone, leaving me with absolutely nothing. So, with absolutely nothing on my side of the field, he was able to set up a pretty scary end board and took round 3. That's 2 losses on the leaderboard, and so I asked myself whether or not my Dark Magician deck can actually win more than once. I guess we'll just have to find out in Game 4. Game 4 was against an Agent deck. I've never seen this deck in action before, I have no idea what it does, so I was very curious to see how it would stack against Dark Magicians. So I won the dice roll, but I lost in terms of drawing. I had a shocking first turn hand. So I set Eternal Soul, linked away for Imduk, ready for Dark Magician to come back in turn 2. Turn 2, I saw the card that all Dark Magicians fear, Harpy's Feather Duster. He took out my entire back row and proceeded to get to work. With little to no defense now, he quickly took round 1. So in round 2, I didn't have much that I could really do with my hand, so I fusioned away into Dark Magicians, set Eternal Soul, and set one mysterious card which I can't actually quite remember what it was. A turn passed back, and he was able to use Regeki to pop my Dark Magicians. Fortunately enough, with Dark Magician's special effect, I was able to bring back Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl. After he destroyed my Dark Magicians, he set a monster in defense and the mysterious back row. Going into turn 3, he attempted to activate Sanctuary in the Sky, which I was able to Ash. Then went into Secret Village to lock him out from using spells, and brought back a Dark Magician from grave. I then overlaid into a new card that I added to the deck that I haven't really been able to use before. Number 89, the Mind Hacker. Right, he has a fun ability of being able to banish from my opponent's extra deck if I discard a card. Then if I'm able to do some damage, I can subsequently banish from the top of his deck once again. So unfortunately after that, he didn't have much of a response to what I had out in the field, so he scooped round 2, pushing us into round 3, putting everything on the line to see whether or not I can actually get a game number 2 once again. So for round 3, I was fortunate enough to start first again, and able to set up a Dragoon Village lockout. At turn 2 of round 3, he then discarded Neptune in order to special summon Venus. So me not really knowing full well what the agents could do, aside from that they were very capable of bringing out bigger bodies on the board, I decided to activate Ice Dragon's Prison in order to banish. Beyond that, unfortunately, he didn't really have much way to play through the Dragoon Secret Village lockout, so he scooped, which means that I was able to take game 4, which means we have 2 on the leaderboard once again. Ecstatic that it wasn't a fluke that Dark Magician was able to get 2 for 2. I'm happy that this deck is finally coming together after months and months of work and collecting. I do want to try and push this deck as far as I can in terms of its ability, but in the future I do plan on eventually retiring the Dark Magician, so I am trying to figure out where I want to move on to next. Now another player at my locals, Jacob, who I actually haven't versed on the channel before, he runs a dinosaur deck, and dinosaurs are something I'm probably interested in going into next. And the reason I want to get into dinosaurs is because dinosaurs are cool. I loved Jurassic Park as a kid. Dinosaurs is the very last deck I used before I quit, so I figured that'd be a really cool deck to get into next. So he was very helpful enough to provide me with a deck list as well as going through how some of the cards work.
You want to get to Misk. So the disposable card is Scrap Raptor. So you go Small World, you go Scrap Raptor, you find something that's a common link.
Time to duel.
So normally when I play my Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, I sign up on the Saturday. So what I didn't know at the time was that the very next day there was going to be a Yu-Gi-Oh OTS tournament in various shops around Victoria, including one in the city called Plenty of Games. Now, because OTS tournaments were taking place, a lot of people were coming out to duel. So Grand J Games was packed once again with duelists getting their decks ready for the next OTS Championships. Between weeks 1 and 2 of this vlog, Konami dropped the ban list for all the cards that will be banned going forward from October 3rd. So week 2 takes place on October 1st and October 2nd. So in these 2 days, everyone tried to use the banned cards as much as possible before they were no longer usable. And so these were some very, very tough duels. Very first duel was against a Telemans deck, and honestly, I have no play-by-play for this duel because it ended so quickly. I probably lost those 2 games within 5 minutes. So it left me a little bit rattled in that, like, I know that Dark Magicians aren't the greatest, but wow, I did terribly against what's considered to be the best deck nowadays. Pretty much I encountered every single banned card that you could think of within that duel. I could see very quickly why these cards are going to get banned. Game 2 was pretty interesting in that the opponent that I was facing was using one of the decks that you get in the Legendary Duels boxes. That was pretty cool in seeing that the very first set of cards that got me back into the game, I was now getting diverse in one of them. Unfortunately, there was quite a big gap in terms of what the decks could do with the Yugi cards and my modern Dark Magician deck. So I did pretty quickly take game 2 and had a win on the board. Now, despite the fact those were some quick duels, it was a really fun time coming across nostalgic cards like Big Shield Gardener or Swords Revealing, like cards that I grew up with when I was a kid, and kind of seeing them nowadays. And plus seeing those cards being used by someone who was much younger than me. So it's nice to know that Yu-Gi-Oh is far from over. It's nice to know that Yu-Gi-Oh isn't just for people my age, and the card game isn't going to go away anytime soon. Game 3 was against a DD deck. Now, these are one of the other decks that I encounter in Master Duel whenever I play, that I always seem to struggle against because I just don't seem to have enough negates. Pretty much this game played out very much like as it would in a game of Master Duel, in that I had no way to stop any of his monsters. So because I knew what I was up against, I was going to be desperate in the game. So round 1, I lost, and in round 2 it looked like the same thing was going to happen again. So I did something I promised I would never do. I used Mystic Mine.
It is a gift to the foes of Mordor. Why not use this mine?
Now, using Mystic Mine gave me enough time to stall. So in order for my opponent to get rid of Mystic Mine, he couldn't play anything. So he had to kind of pass his first turn, and which then got rid of my Mystic, but it gave me enough time to set up a board in order to go for game. Unfortunately, he got to go first for round 3, and so he once again set up a nice pendulum board with what felt like 20 negates. I just had no way of getting around it, so he did take round 3 and won the game. It was pretty cool playing a DD deck. Again, I'd only really seen it in Master Duel, so seeing it in real life is really cool because, like as I've always been saying on the channel, like regardless of win or lose, all the duels that I've been playing have been fantastic for me as a returning player, because I've missed out on 15 years of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's changed so radically in that time, and as much as I can try and look back and research and listen about the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Since I stopped playing, I find that playing these duels against different types of decks is fantastic. It's just a good time, regardless of win or lose. But what do you know, Game 4 was another protagonist battle, but this time it was Yugi versus the guy on the motorcycle. I need to look up his name. Yusei. No, that's not his name. Yugioh Zexel? Oh, the guy's name's Yuma. Okay, so it was a Yuma versus Yugi deck. Now the deck isn't what you would call meta, but then again, my magicians aren't meta either. This was a very cool protagonist duel. Because it was a protagonist battle, we quickly brought out our big boss monsters. Him with his Utopia, and me with my Dark Magicians. Now, unfortunately for him, I was also able to bring out Dragoon quite quickly in the duel. So with a combination of Dragoon, as well as being able to recycle my Banishing with Dark Magical Circle, I quickly undid his field and did take round 1. Going into game 2, I was allowed to go first again. However, it's a Dark Magician deck, so I bricked yet again. But I was fortunate enough to grab a Skill Drain, which turned out to be very handy because I was very close to losing. Unlike me, he didn't brick and was ready to start building into his big Utopias, so I had to use Skill Drain to lock him down. I in turn was not able to do much because I was under my own Skill Drain, and so I attempted to go for lethal as quickly as I could. But I got Mirror Forced twice in a row. Very funny to see in a modern game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You don't really see Mirror Force that often anymore. I was pleasantly surprised in that I was in a bad way because I couldn't even attack him. Now, I'd realized at this point that I'd shot myself in the foot and that there was only one card in my entire deck that could actually get rid of his through attack power alone. It did become a game of a draw, pass, until I was able to get a Soul Servant, which then led me to Secrets of Dark Magic for me to bring out Dragoon and for me to crash with it. Now that his big Utopia monster was out of the way, I was then able to go for game. For the 3rd week in a row, I'd won 2 out of 4 games. But after seeing the excitement and anticipation of all the other players at the store, a very bad idea crept into my head, in that I decided to enter into my very first Yugioh OTS Championship. 4 months ago, I made the decision to return to Yu-Gi-Oh! After 15 years. Over those 4 months, you've watched as I've built my Dark Magician deck from scratch by collecting and trading cards and trying to make it the best deck that I could possibly make it. Now, after months and months of work, I'm having such a great time playing locals, but it's time that I try and push myself that extra step further and see how I go. I'm not expecting anything amazing. This could go disastrously. I'm not gonna lie, I'm genuinely fucking terrified. As I record this is 3 in the morning and I've been working on my deck trying to make changes to it to try and make it more consistent. I think I've got it at a place where I'm happy with it. So I guess here is my OTS Championship deck list. Now you can see I've made some fair changes to it, but I'm nervous, guys. I don't know if I should have done this. I don't know when you're meant to enter these things. I don't know like how many times you've meant to have won. Like I'm completely in the dark here. But I'm also really excited. So this series has always been about me pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing things I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to come back and collect Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and I've done that. I've always wanted to come back and play the game again, and I've done that with you guys. And I've always wanted to see how I can go in a proper championship. I don't know how I'm going to go tomorrow. It's really late right now. I'm probably not going to get much sleep. This is probably the stupidest idea I've ever had. And I'm really excited to share this part of my journey with you and coming back into the game after 15 years. So, wish me luck. And I am back. That was so unexpected. Today I was nervous for a variety of reasons. I really should have slept. I was so tired. In the morning I ran into Karim, who was also playing the OTS tournament for the first time as well, which is really cool. So we were there pretty early, so he and I played a few different games to test out our decks to make sure we were happy with them before we started. So I submitted my list, and we played a few practice games using his Elemental Hero deck versus my Dark Magician deck. And I was very surprised in that my deck kind of slaps. And I was pleasantly surprised in that my deck suddenly was able to stand up against his heroes. Suddenly able to consistently bring out Dark Magician. I was consistently able to bring out Dark Dragoon, as well as Secret Village of the Spellcasters, and just locking down his field every single time. And we kept practicing over and over and over again and getting ready for the big day. He had a better idea of who we were up against, as most of the people he had already played before. Kind of quickly jerried that most, if not all, players were going to be playing Telements, and all probably using cards that were about to be banned. I suddenly got nervous again in that despite my deck suddenly becoming consistent, I had no idea whether or not it was going to be consistent enough against Telements, which I'd never won a game against before. So unlike the local tournaments, this won't be out of 4 rounds, but it'll be out of 5. So game 1 was against Telements, crossed with Dangers. Game 1 felt pretty much like a repeat of game 1 at my locals, in that I was pretty much just watching a master at work. I very much lost game 1 again very, very quickly. I wasn't disheartened though, in that I had no expectations coming into the OTS apart from just wanting to experience it. The thing I hadn't experienced before is that there were judges, and the judges, if you've never been to an OTS before, roam around just spot checking, making sure everyone's doing the right thing. And that was an added element to the tournament that made it feel very serious and more sport-like. As a side note, I won't have much of the play-by-plays for the OTS. Whilst I was given permission to film during the tournament, I kind of wanted to be a bit more respectful and take it seriously, as everyone else was. So I didn't really want to have my camera in people's way when we were dueling. The game 2 was against Mathmex. Now, I had never played Mathmex before. I had no idea what to look out for, and I pretty quickly learned that they are also one of the meta decks out there. So I had no idea what to try and negate. I had no idea what boards to try and set up to stop him, and he too was able to very, very quickly take game 2. Post-game, he was very helpful to try and teach me how the deck works and what to look out for, what to try and negate, what to strategize against, which is really kind of him, and yet another reminder of why the Yugioh community is so good. Going into round 3, I was up against another Telements deck. It's a big shocker. So I lost the first round of game 3, and so I was able to start first in round 2. I was very lucky in that I was able to set up a Spellcaster Village Lockout as well as Skill Drain. So round 2, unfortunately, but kind of funnily, ended up being a very long round of draw pass, because neither of us could do anything. He had a big board, and I couldn't draw into anything that I needed, until eventually I was able to draw into a Soul Servant, which then allowed me to get into Dragoon and then take round 2. Round 3, he started first, and he ended up with a terrifying board of Chaos Ruler, Baron, and 3 other monsters whose names escape me, but they all had negates. I know in my hand I had nothing that I could use to stop him. And so it came down to literally the heart of the cards in order for me to draw into a single card that could turn this duel around.
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba, but it does contain the unstoppable
Mystic Mine.
Impossible!
Played Mystic Mine and was able to stop his entire board from being able to stop anything that I did. And so being free to be able to do what I needed to do under mine, I was able to set up Dragoon and started popping his monsters one by one. And unfortunately we went for time due to round 2, and so I won. 1 win on the board, my very first win against Telements, and moving on to round 4. So round 4 was a Telement Despia deck, and kind of understanding how both those decks worked, I knew I had to try and get out Secret really quickly as possible to try and stop him from setting up any fusion monsters. So I was very fortunate in the first round that despite me losing the die roll and going second, I was able to set up a Dragoon Lockout again and take round 1. So round 2 came by and I had to go second yet again. I once again got very lucky in that despite the fact that he had set up a board, I was able to go to Dragoon Lockout for the second time, which didn't necessarily stop him, but then we went into this wild back and forth game of him stopping my monsters, I was stopping his, and so on and so forth, until I won. Now I was on 2 out of 5 games with the last round ready to go. Now, this is where it gets a bit contentious about how well I actually performed, because the person I was meant to play against dropped out. And so, with no opponents for me to verse, I was automatically given the win, which means that technically I won my very first 3 games and 3 out of 5. I am over the moon about how I went today. I was shocked in that I was versing the very best decks in the game and against very, very good duelists, and that my Dark Magician deck actually kind of slapped. I had such a good time playing the OTS tournament and meeting new people and experiencing a whole new way of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! I also got to do some trading. I got myself a manga, Blue Eyes White Dragon. I got myself a Lost Art Bestinatrix, and also just making some fantastic memories on the way. I know that it wasn't just me at work here and getting to where I needed to be for the OTS tournament. Me being able to play the way I did today and having my deck the way I needed it to be today was because of you. And every single duelist at Grand J Games who I've played against and has taught me how to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Once again. And I thank every single one of you guys for that. And because of that, I was able to get into the top 8, which is really wild for a Dark Magician deck. And I know it was through a technicality. I'll take the win where I can, even if I've Stephen Bradbury'd into the top 8. Thank you once again for joining me, guys. No idea where the vlogs are going to take me next. I also want to say thank you for everyone that's been tuning into the streams that we've been doing lately. I did a recent stream of Master Duel, as well as I did a stream with Ethan doing the COD beta, and we've got some more streams planned coming up. If you want to help the channel out, make sure to like the video. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us send the video out into the algorithm so other people can see our content. Thank you so much for joining me once again, and I'll see you when I see you.